everyone. It's Pittico from Rock Daydream Nation. Look who's here. David Botas. Welcome, my friend. Good to have you back on the channel. How are you, mate?
I'm doing good. I'm happy to be here. It's an honor. How are you doing?
Honor to have you on the show. No, good. It's all good. It's a beautiful sunny day in Sydney, kind of warm, wintry, or as warm as it gets. But today we're going to revisit an album that I know we were on a panel a couple of years ago on the Contrarians, but I want to take things in a different direction. And we're talking about this maligned, misunderstood, mistaken, anything with an MIS in front of it, David, they usually talk about it. And this is Judas Priest Turbo. Easily the
Yeah,
most, I reckon it's the most spoken about Judas Priest album in their discography because I think it was such a change of direction for them. And, it usually brings out pretty adverse or pretty strong opinions. Wouldn't you agree?
it's infamous. It is notorious. It definitely is polarizing. It's basically a fork in the road
Mm.
in the Judas Priest trajectory.
Absolutely. And today I'm going to I've got a bit of a take on this, which I don't think we've discussed and, was certainly not discussed in the Contrarians, and that's why we're doing it in this show. So we'll go through the album like our traditional format shows, talk about the songs, the context. I'll briefly tell you my encounter with this was probably the song Turbo Lover, the song, catchy song, great film clip. It's got that Ray Harryhausen stop motion photography, nifty. Definitely it was a change of sound, but I wasn't like fully fledged into Judas Priest in 1986 as a lot of the older, more, battle-hardened fans were. What was your first encounter with this particular album?
About 4 years ago, listening to Spotify Judas Priest Radio, getting into the band, and like you said, it has such a polarizing reputation that I heard Turbo Lover come on as like maybe one of the top like 10 songs that played initially. And I was like, oh, this sounds like something from the 80s. And I just like, dove right in. As I mentioned when we did Tusk, I'm very much attracted to these albums that sort of have like the infamous like reactions because I can sort of like get an objective point of view before I get the sink my teeth into the identity of the band. What is this, like their 10th album, maybe ninth or 10th
Mm,
album at this point? So like they already had an identity that was pretty much like sort of like piecemeal, each album sort of like connecting to the one before it almost, and then this one was just like a radical shift. I wanted to see what the big deal was here without having to feel like I'm betraying the love that I had, me falling in love with like the great Judas Priest prior to it.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, so this comes out in 1986, very commercial sounding. I think it sold 1 million copies, went top 20 or thereabouts, but I don't think they were quite the same after this because when you're talking about screaming for vengeance and maybe this album before Defenders of the Faith, they had we're on a little bit of a trajectory, especially in America as a major live draw card. They played Live Aid and definitely was screaming for vengeance. I think that did 2 to 3 mil. But Turbo was definitely one where it was very radical in its change of sound, very commercial. And I think they were going for a more pop wide. I think they wanted to go into the masses and not be genre specific because Screaming for Vengeance, even though it had a broader sort of appeal, especially in the American market, it didn't quite break through to that sort of the broader masses. So in the context of what was happening in 86, David, Bon Jovi, Slippery When Wet, huge breakthrough. Pop metal, hair metal, it was prevalent on MTV, and a lot of it was sort of bankrolling. Money, printing money. Motley Crue, Would you agree that those bands and the success of those bands was definitely a big influence on the, you know, Judas Priest saying we've got to have a bit of that?
Well, yeah. I'm not sure how much of it was record label pressure or just this when we look back on the 80s, there's always this, I mean, I was hardly even there. Like there's the tale that's told about the 80s was that there was very much like a conformist attitude towards what type of singles are going to get put out by which band. The band's going to sound a little bit too much like all the bands that are popular at the time. This always feels like the 5150. This is like Judas Priest's Van Hagar moment, because it has this like shift into where in 86 you had Van Hagar show up with 5150, more synthesized, more like even more melodic than before, not the rough edges, more accessible lyrics, more mainstream like image. The same thing can be said for a notoriously for The Ultimate Sin, Ozzy Osbourne. That's an album that I love. That's my favorite Ozzy album.
Yeah, it's one
I'm
of
just
mine
at that
too. One of mine too.
like that's
I've actually done a show with the Parish of Rock folks. Check that out on the Ultimate Sin. I love that album, so I'm glad you mentioned that.
yeah, there's that one. There's like Rush, Power Windows, Hold Your Fires around this time.
Yeah, yep.
There's like definitely this like, oh man, the synthesizers are starting to take over and like they're it's almost like the disco sucks moment from like 1978-ish, where
Mm,
like the disco sort of permeating into like the favorite bands. And it's like that happening all over again where people are sort of like used to what they're used to. And
yes.
then they're noticing that the youth is sort of coming in and taking over a bit, like on the influence.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's kind of like the reputation that it seems like it has. So I don't as I'm paraphrasing Neil Young. Neil Young said once, just because like something's popular means doesn't mean that you don't believe in it. And to the audience, it might seem like every time that a band or an artist like leans towards something that is popular, it might seem like it's just for cynical reasons. It's just they're doing it to cash in for the money. But
Yep.
I try to be objective. Is the music good or is it not? That's at
Yeah.
the end of the day, that's all I care about.
Right. Well, my take on this album is twofold. I think there's a commercial element to it, and I think there's a very personal element to it, which I will talk about shortly. But the commercial element is definitely they're chasing a more widestream, mainstream type of sound, and I'll even throw in ZZ Top with Eliminator.
Yes. Yes, perfect.
Hot for Love. When you hear the synthesizer beats, you've got electronic drums, synth lines. If that song had kicked off, they could have gone into a whole different dance, techno, metal path, which would have been quite interesting, something completely different. And maybe that may have led them into something that might have been semi-industrial. But that song, I always gravitate to that song because I think, they're putting a feeler out that, oh, okay, ZZ Top were basically putting bluesy vocals, bluesy guitar lines over dance beats, and Judas Priest are trying the same. Let's talk about Turbo Lover, and that will be the key. And we'll go through the songs and then a little bit of a journey with my take, and I'll just weave it in and out with our conversation. So Turbo Lover, it's got fundamentally, when you strip it down, it's got the Judas Priest guitar chord sound, the chugga, it's got kind of a structure, but there's a lot of slow build up to it. So it's not one that is like off Stained Class or British Steel or Screaming for Vengeance. It's not one of those ones where it's straight into the guitar, verse, chorus, verse, chorus. The structure is kind of a slow build up. But when it comes into a payoff, boy, it has that classic Judas Priest sound, and it certainly is ear candy. What do you think of this song?
That's a good point you made there. It reminds me of how like Electric Eye off Screaming for Vengeance is, where it's kind of minimalist during the verse part, but this one is almost like it's a little bit more low key. It's kind of actually like sensual. I think the lyrics are sort of implying that as well too. So I think that this is a lot of fun. Like it is. This is like the Judas Priest album that you can kind of maybe dance to with certain songs. Um, you make a good point about how with this song and this being sort of like the one that's the sort of carried the torch for this album the most. Like people still get all excited when they hear that when they still play it on tour.
Yes.
You listen to it, you never think that you never listen to Turbo Lover, the song, or in my opinion, the album, and you think they sound like a different band. I'm aware that they definitely are trying to sound like the moment that's happening in 1986, but I never will put this on and be like, "Oh, is this Bon Jovi? Is this
Mm,
ZZ Top or something?" Like they're not getting confused with anybody else. It's them taking basically saying, "Okay, we want to change our image, pull by the horns. What can we do that is the current aesthetic?" And I think it works really good. It's ahead of its time. It might be it's not like 5 years ahead of its time. It's like 20 to 30 years ahead of its time.
yeah, it's certainly the showstopper. When I saw Priest about 5, 6 years ago, it got the biggest cheer. And I know that, look, this album copped a lot of flack, and I think the band distanced themselves. But I think over time, you know, they have come to reconcile with this album. And I think Rob likes this album a lot. Always been a very strong champion of this song. And to me, it's one of the highlights of their set. It's killer. It's a really, really good song, very strong. When you look at it lyrically to me, I've got this theory that this album is a coming out album for Rob Halford. And if this was
Yeah.
successful and went into pop mainstream, then I think you may have had Rob a bit more confident to come out of because there's so many lyrics that are from the perspective of a gay man that I think at the time may not have been sort of prevalent to the average genre listener. And it didn't have enough success into the mainstream for people to notice. But I think that there is so many lyrics in this album where it's about a guy that's repressed, in a relationship, confused, and wanting to come out of because Rob was a big fan of Freddie Mercury. He could see all the success that he was having, but at the same time, he understood the duality problems that he was successful in Europe, UK, but being overtly camp and overtly sort of coming out in America was not probably a good business decision because,
Yeah.
we're talking in 2026 language, 2025 language here because in the 80s was a different time. But
Yeah.
look, David, locked in, private property, out in the cold, hot for love, reckless. It's all, to me, there's all signaling. And it's about, to me, I think this is Rob Halford trying to come out. And who knows, if this was a big commercial success, then I think he may have a lot earlier. When did he come out? I think it was in the 90s, around the time when
Like
he was solo and Fight.
98.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
yeah.
what do you think of my theory?
Um, I think it's a good one. I think that when I have similar commentary on that too when it comes to a couple other tracks. It's easy to look back now and sort of know the whole story of Rob Halford coming out and being homosexual and sort of like attributing every single time that he had something that was could have been implied that he's talking about something gay, and then there's certain things that are sort of like out and pretty like obvious when you look back on some of the Jawbreaker. You know what I mean? Like certain song titles and certain like different
Eat Me
lyrics that he
Alive.
has. Yeah,
Absolutely. I mean, the
yeah,
reason I hold up this album, this was sort of like putting the toes in the water and going into that territory. But this one was, okay, I want to make my best chance of being who I am and being free and just being who I am. And that's fair enough. And it seems a bit sad that he couldn't be himself in the
Yeah.
80s because it was a different time, was to be in
Yeah.
pop, because I think pop was much more sort of sympathetic and much more conducive. Like Frankie Goes to Hollywood. To me, I use that as an example. The song Relax, huge hit in the UK, huge hit in Europe, not so much in America, but it certainly got a fair amount of airplay. And to me, that kind of might have been a signal because, Rob was hitting the clubs in Ibiza, read his book, used to see Freddie at the other end of the bar, that sort of thing, like
Yeah.
passing ships in the night. I think that he was looking at other sort of musical genres and thinking that, these guys are being open and can be themselves. And I think he was trying to push it as far as he could to come out of the closet without him overtly calling the album "I'm Out of the Closet," and just expressing himself and just, this is who I am sort of situation. So I think you got to get this
Yeah.
album a lot more emotional kudos than people probably give it. There's a couple of smoke and what I call smoke and mirror songs that put the people off the trail of the actual concept of this album, like Parental Guidance, which we'll talk about, and maybe Rock You All Over the World, which is just a stock standard Judas Priest song. But I think this album has got more personal songs, love songs, than any other Judas Priest album, and I think they put a lot. They wanted to really break the mainstream, break it into pop.
Yeah. It would have been easier if Judas Priest was a band that made music like Elton John, maybe, to sort of like, dip the toe into like it not being that much of a shock. But when you're in a heavy metal band and a heavy metal band releases Turbo Lover, um, I can see what you're saying about how, um, especially knowing now that we know that Rob was just in the closet, that it's going to flag that, it's going to flag to be like, oh, like, yeah, it totally makes sense now that he's like, he's being like a little bit more like sensual and effeminate. It's not necessarily what you'd get from heavy metal at the time. You know what I
No,
mean? Yeah, he doesn't also ever have any, he's like this hyper masculine like image, like by that point, but he doesn't have like the scantily clad women dancing around him,
yeah,
and all that stuff. He doesn't have like all the cheerleaders and stuff. It's not like a Motley Crue video. You don't
and they
see that.
and they soften the edges because they drop the leather and studs, they drop the S&M side of it, which kind of
Yeah.
hoodwinked the audience for a long time, didn't they?
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
like a 58-year-old looking back, I'm going, of course, but in the day it was kind of rough, tough, kind of edgy, punky. But they dropped the S&M part of it and, grew his hair. The whole image was a bit more glammy. But again, one eye on Motley Crue, one eye on the pop market, and I've got this personal journey. He said that the lyrics were unfocused because he was deep in alcoholism, probably
Yeah.
cocaine, but I think he's unfiltered, and he's never been as unfiltered as this album about his personal expression. Let's pick a song like Out in the Cold. Look at that. That is Give Me a Chance, Baby. It's kind of a very heartfelt song. I don't think Rob's been as deep in the gut. So he's in a relationship with someone, and it's the power ballad of the power ballads, isn't it?
I love this song. This is up there with all favorite of like across the board Judas Priest. I mean, there's two things about this song. Like, for one, it has an excellent synthesizer intro that opens it up. So as far as we're talking about the aesthetic of the time, this is like the power battle. It's probably the only like really emotional, like all around emotional anguish, like sad song on the album. And um you also have, if you strip down the song to just the melody, the vocal melody, and just the chords, this song can be played on an acoustic guitar. Like not every song on this album can be done that way, but this is a song that the composition is like exquisite. So like this song can live in existence in tons of different like genres and styles. You could play this on piano and it's still going to have as much of an effect. It's mainstream, not in the sense of being cheap or anything, but just as being like powerfully accessible, like the way like a Beatles song would be, you know?
Mm. You know, the synth guitars add an extra layer. It's very textured, adds a more oomph. I don't know, you know, and you're probably thinking, oh, that's strange, you know, like extra texture with synths, but it kind of, it's the synth lines, the padding, it just adds some weight to the emotion of this whole song. It's got a bit of a Georgie Moroder feel. And if you're familiar with Georgie Moroder and his soundtrack work, that was very much the sound of the 80s. But I think, you know, you just look at the lyrics and he's really pouring his heart. And he's often said that he felt very lonely, that you've got all these guys in the band. He's the guy by himself, struggling. I don't know exactly, you know, what was happening at the point of time of this album other than what I've read, but it's certainly, he was very troubled and he's pouring his heart. And again, it comes at the feel that I think he's almost just like a couple of degrees away from, he just wants to tell the world of who I am, but he can't. And maybe, you know, he was thinking, this is my gateway. If this was a major hit, that maybe I do have a path to, you know, reveal my true self. Love this song. Reckless. That's another great song. Right at the end of the
Yeah.
album. And if only it got picked up by that Top Gun soundtrack, that could have been the, you know, mainstream success.
Yeah, there's not even any synthesizer on that one, is there?
No, but it's catchy. It's
Yeah,
hooky.
they
And it's
should have.
poppy. It's poppy. And it's like Judas Priest had put their sound through a filter and it's come out really catchy and put it. It's like they've actually sat down and really carefully arranged this song to make it sound more poppy than they normally would. Because a lot of their songs, you know, like British Steel and Screaming for Vengeance, you know, they demo, they go into the studio, they work it through. This one sounds like they're really sitting down around the table and working out and making it something that, you know, hey, it's us, but we want it to be accessible and poppy. And I could just imagine this song being on the Top Gun soundtrack along with the Danger Zone and Take My Breath Away.
Yeah, yeah. This one is like, if the whole album sounded like this song, they would have. I don't think there would have been any type of like backlash with an identity crisis with Judas Priest. If somebody slipped this into Defenders of the Faith or Screaming for Vengeance, I would never look at the track and be like, "Oh, this sounds like it's not Priest anymore." This is the like probably the only song on the album, and maybe it's because the synthesizers aren't that like that big like flag, that red flag for people, but it's the only song on the album that actually has a connection to like the old Judas Priest identity, but still fits in and is harmonious with the rest of the album with this new identity that they want to like adopt for that time. So it does this, it sort of like threads the needle there. It does that hard work. It's again another like perfect Judas Priest song. They should have released this as a single, like the first single, and then probably did Turbo Lover as the like the bait and switch to see like, hey, this is what's different about us. Here's like a central like sort of, I don't know if you consider, is Turbo Lover like, it's kind of like a dance. It's not a power ballad. It's sort of like like a low like a mid tempo sort of like a dance like techno-y type of track for that time. I don't even know what it would fit into. Like, there's nothing
Mm.
else that sounds like Turbo Lover during that time that was on radio. That was a mainstream like heavy metal or rock band. Am I out of it? Like, am I missing something obvious?
No,
Like,
no, 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 you're not. No, you're not. Hot for Love, which is the song before, again, we're just recapping, that's definitely picking up the Eliminator vibe. You look at the lyrics, you're like a wolf on a prowl. So again, I don't know too many of the mainstream pop. If I'm talking about my wife or something like that, I wouldn't describe my wife as a wolf on the prowl. See, there's all these little lyrical hints, but we just
Yeah.
didn't pick it up at the time. And I just think that this is really, yeah, hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it, David?
Yeah, I think this I put this one down as like Turbo Lover Part Two because it's
Mm,
the other song that's like more dancey. It definitely like got the Eliminator like dance vibes going on.
yeah.
Afterburner. It's a little bit darker than Turbo Lover, a little bit more aggressive.
Mm,
It's not sensual as much. This one's more like, taking control and like being more dominant, I guess. I do take note that it does have those drum, I don't know what you call them, the like, synthesizer drum fills that it always reminds me of like Yes, Owner of a Lonely Heart that happened during like the guitar soloing part towards the end of the song.
mm,
And that might be offensive to some people. They're listening to this and saying, "What is this going on over here? This isn't Run DMC or whatever." You know what I mean? To me, I love it. I think
yeah,
everybody was very nearsighted when it came to being really like reactionary towards this album when it came out.
yeah. Some more evidence of the turmoil of Rob, writing this album. The song "Private Property." So you got the lyrics.
Yeah,
So keep your hands off private property. Keep your hands off private property. Keep your hands off me. I'm number one when I turn it on. Do you think you can relate? You'd be amazed, left in a daze to see me operate. You live in a fantasy. I don't even care. If you're looking for sympathy, it ain't there. So again, it's the duality of, in the closet, private property. There's a lot of wordplay where, there's all this turmoil, but he wants to get out. And then he's talking about there's certain common words that are used quite frequently in this album. Excite, excitement, excite. You get me so excited. Yeah, I just think it's a deeper album that people it's a deeper album than people give it credit for. And I think, again, it's going back to the theme that this is almost him, announcing to the world that I am who I am, and this is who I am. But because the album flopped and didn't do so well, they basically had to regroup, and Ram It Down came out. Now, I know that this album and Ram It Down were originally done as a double album. So a lot of people will throw shade on me and go, oh, it was a double album. But, conceptually, Ram It Down came out as something different, a little bit more, let's go back to the traditional Judas Priest, even though it still had that sort of soundscape of this modern, more poppy Judas Priest. And then, Painkiller, that's a whole new world. It's like they press the reset button, and we've got to keep up with Thrash. So I think this album was definitely, it changed Judas Priest forever.
yeah. I echo what you say about Private Property. The thing about Private Property is that I love this song, but there's like only two like ways that I can sort of like take the chorus. It's either like if I'm like 5 years old and I'm a kid and I'm just yelling like hands off me, like, and just in a very like childlike way, or it does sound like a gay guy telling somebody like, leave me alone. The the image at the time of this album being recorded with Rob Halford, sort of like portraying a, a man who is comfortable in his masculinity, but also to be masculine and submissive at the time were sort of like mutually exclusive terms. Like you wouldn't see a cowboy stereotype sort of ever telling like his lead female in a film like hands off me, this is private property. You wouldn't ever see that. So there's like this uncomfortability, if that's a word, where to be a man means you don't want to be submissive. Um, and Rob is like someone who's able to sort of like switch between being dominant and submissive. And this is more of the song where he's like, I'm not your sub anymore. I'm not being submissive anymore. I can actually dominate. So it definitely like it wouldn't sound like an overbearing like a woman that's doing that. Like a guy would never
Yeah,
tell.
yeah, absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. You're spot on. So, and this is like this was always here in the lyrics, and it's only like subsequent revelations and a great space of time later that you can look back and go, yeah, this is what it is, because the role of the man in this lyric across the board in this lyric is not the traditional, you know, role in a relationship. It actually
right, right.
challenges. It's kind of gender fluid and sexuality
Yeah,
fluid, isn't it?
right, right, right.
It's very fluid in the lyrics. But there it was, always there, but nobody sort of realizes it. Look, David, a lot of people, especially I come across, and it frustrates me a little bit, where a lot of people say, oh, I don't read the lyrics, I'm not interested in the lyrics. To me, the lyrics are important, because the music can be fine, but the lyrics usually puts the headspace of where that person is at that particular time. And I think this is really important, that this is a document in time of Rob Halford's life. And it was clearly troubled and, you know, artistically quite brave. I think I said that in the Contrarians. I said this is a very artistically brave album. And
Yeah, yeah.
there were a lot of glazed eyes on the Contrarians going, huh? You know, sort of, well, it is. You got to dig the surface. But I didn't go into this subtext at that particular time. And maybe if I went into the subtext,
Well, I never. You had mentioned earlier like that this album flopped, and like in a way it did, but it's like a very unique. Like it's flopped with an asterisk because what it did was it pissed off a core part of their audience, but it replaced it. Like it still sold just as much as like the last album, but it was different people that were championing it and going to the shows. So they wanted to sort of like double and become like more popular, but instead they just like traded one type of fan for a different type of fan and stayed like in a lateral you know, success wise.
I got a different take. I've got a different take. I reckon they lost a ton of their supporters or fans or genre fans. It may have attracted a little bit of mainstream, and basically with Ram It Down, that, you know, the stocks were way low. I think that barely got gold. And when it was a lot of their mainstream, a lot of their genre fans went on to Megadeth, Metallica, Slayer, Exodus,
Yeah.
went into harder stuff. And I don't think Priest ever got them back. And by the time that Priest realized that, okay, we better drop the trying to conquer the Bon Jovi or hair metal or mainstream world, we better toughen up and, you know, keep up with the Joneses, put our Painkiller. It was probably too late, because the people that were buying Metallica, Slayer, Megadeth, etc., looked at Painkiller and go, yeah, we've heard it already. You know, we've been listening to this music for 5-6 years and looking at Judas Priest as not being as the innovator as the chasers. So I really think they just lost
Yeah.
a huge chunk of their audience and never got them back.
Yeah.
It was too radical. So they really went for the mainstream, brave, and got my theory on the Rob Halford journey part of it. But I really think they lost a lot of their audience and never got them back.
Maybe it's like because like what you're saying is valid. Um, and every band has its own story, especially like if it's a band that's been around for a while, there's always the fatigue and sort of like the roots of the identity of they've already had 8, 9, 10 albums. On the contrary, like at that period of time, you had Dream Evil had come out like a couple like at the same time as Ram It Down. that wasn't necessarily, I guess you could say that Sacred Heart is kind of like the 86, like more like, mainstream version of Dio, but like a lot of other bands that never really wanted to embrace the mainstream that were just popular like in the early 80s or the 80s. I think it was just time for all of them. Like very rarely did any band, even if they didn't do the daring thing that Priest did with Turbo, like I think there's more than just like that metric that would just sort of show why there was that decline. Do you know what I'm saying? Like
Mm.
because like for instance like Dio, they didn't have at least this quick grasp of like having all these new fans come to the concert. I think that the Fuel for Life tour was supposed to be like a very successful tour for Priest at the time still. I think a lot of the bands that were like hot in 1983, like they weren't going to sell tickets for what you just said in 88, 89 because of like Metallica and like um what is it thrash and stuff like that and the underground sort of like bubbling up. And I forget about what's going to happen with like Soundgarden and everything like that a couple of years after, but so there's just a lot of different reasons with it. They had I don't know if you agree with this or not, but this is the second time that Priest had like a reactive, like disappointing album to like from their fan base because that was sort of going on after British Steel with Point of Entry. People were saying that that was kind of like a mainstream, like they're
Yeah,
just doing it but for
yeah,
completely different reasons. Like,
absolutely, absolutely. Reactive, reactive. Yeah,
yeah,
they're an interesting test case, the old Judas Priest, because they're innovators, but they're also reactors, depending on how successful the album is. Now, so I've got the theory about this album. I've spoken about it. You might want to
yep.
say, well, how does the rest of the band fall into this? I just think they let Rob do his thing. There was an awareness of who Rob was, his journey. They just let him do the thing because let's face it, Rob is the mouthpiece. He is the focal point of the band, and the narrative of this particular album is the lyrics. So they do their thing. He does his thing, and that's how I think it. I think they just went with the flow. What do you think?
I think the same. Yeah, it doesn't seem like there was that much interest in any of the. Are you talking about just like as a songwriter, like with lyrics and such?
Oh, I'm just saying in general. Yeah, I think there would. I mean, I think that KK and Glenn Tipton were curious enough to use guitar synthesizers, and Rob would have, in a band collaborative space, sort of say, "Look, this is the direction we need to go." But from a lyrical point of view and that sort of stuff, I just think they let Rob do his own thing, and this is why I think it's a little bit of a Trojan horse album.
Yeah, it definitely. I think that through the success that they had, they were emboldened to take another risk, and they had. I don't know if Defenders went multi-platinum in the U.S., but like I'm pretty sure Screaming for Vengeance did eventually. They were a big draw at the time. I wonder if do you think that if this album had come out, if they didn't have like 2 years breaks between albums, and like let's say this album came out in like '83 or '84 with like the Sense, do you think that they would have had a better luck with sort of like because it seems like this type of album would not be able to come out in 88. There seems to be such a radical shift in those like 84, 85, 86, 87 to where like you only have this shelf life to be able to do this type of album for a little while. Like Afterburner wouldn't have came out in like 88. Do you know like these type of sounding albums? But if they came out a little bit like the same time Eliminator did, do you think that Turbo Love is kind of like the Legs? Like that's another song like Legs or like Rough Boy. Those are sort of like mid-tempo kind of dancey songs that aren't so abrasive. Like that the only thing I can think of that would be sort of like relatable to like the way that Turbo Lover is as far as format like on the radio goes.
Yep.
I think they would have been better off. I think this album was just like 2 years too late to they might have been able to capture like lightning in a bottle a little bit more with it. I don't know.
Absolutely, absolutely. I agree with you. I agree. If it came out a couple of years earlier, it would have been good. Originally, when we were going to do this show, folks, David and I were contemplating the idea of substituting lyrics and songs, because a song like Parental Guidance, I don't like that at all. There's nothing worse than listening to middle-aged rockers getting all preachy, and it just seems really cheesy, and it just seems out of step. And from a theme point of view, it is kind of out of step with the rest of the album. That's why I call it a smoke and mirrors song, because I think this is a concept album. But let's throw a couple of off-topic songs just to throw you off the chase. And I just think this song I like the melody. It's got that real sort of anthemic sound to it. And Rob is a big, seems to be a bit of a fan with what I call English football crowd chants, like United. Yeah. United, we don't need no. A lot of it is kind of, you got what I call terrace choir sound songs. And Parental Guidance has that chorus that has that, that football chant sound to it. And I thought, as a concept of this show, we were contemplating swapping lyrics and music for Parental Guidance. So I think I was thinking of, could they do Breaking the Law, the words to Breaking the Law to this song, and swapping
anything
it around
on this. Yeah, anything on the lyrics. I like this song. I don't love it. It's this one and Rock You All Around the World that are the only mid songs on it. Everything else, the other 7 tracks, I think are 10 out of 10. I love this album. Parental Guidance is, you make a good point with it being preachy. If the song was good, I wouldn't be as, I wouldn't be, if the song was better, I wouldn't be as sort of like just lukewarm on it. It's more so about like them trying to channel a 12-year-old. They're aware that they're singing this song in front of a crowd. It's arena rock. They want to come up with a chorus that they know is going to be played in front of a bunch of people. It's going to be sung back to them when they put the microphone out to the audience. And they're also aware that they have a bunch of kids that they're trying to like wrangle. It's almost unfair because Judas Priest actually has personal reason to sort of like want to speak out against this. It just didn't come out in the best form this way. Like it's not
I
like
agree. They were going through a lot
Yeah.
of crap, weren't they? They had
Yeah.
the legal lawsuits. The PRMC were going off in regards to the Dirty Dozen or whatnot, and heavy metal was
Yeah.
right in the crosshairs. But I think the way that even Rob's vocal inflections on this song, it's kind of really, it's beyond preachy. It's kind of almost, it's a caricature. He's playing a
Yeah.
character, and the way his vocals go up and down, and it hits a bum note. It's just a little bit off key.
Yeah, I agree with that. You can tell that you can tell he's trying to play, he's doing the Mr. Rogers neighbor. I don't know if in Australia they have Mr. Rogers or the reference, but like just as, like an early morning child's TV show. He's going down to like their level and thinking, how could I talk to a kid? Instead of just realizing that, Rob, the way you've been talking the whole time, the kids have been listening for years. Like you don't have to change, anything about the way that you're talking, that you're singing or whatever, your tone.
But the melodies are great, and as I said, it really plays to that football terrace sound. The pub choir, the football fans. Another part of it, I think it really picks up off Freddie Mercury and Live Aid with the Harry Belafonte or which Rob still does in concert. The call and response. So I think he's bringing that into this this song. All the stadium rock cliches, the anthem. So, look, I think this is a really strong album, David. You take out the 2 fillers for me, and that would be Rock You Around the World and Parental Guidance. And I think if you took those out, then you'd potentially have a very dark, concept album about a guy in a straight heavy metal band that just wants to break out and tell the world who he is.
I agree completely. Again, like we're both on the same page, like we were at Tusk. Like you take those two mid songs out, and everything else is a 10 out of 10 for me. And I'm not like a huge. My top four Judas Priest ranked albums are the first four from the 70s. Then it's Turbo. So it's not like I lean towards 80s music more, and that's why I love Turbo. It doesn't make any sense. Like I'm a big 70s Priest guy. But for whatever reason, this album, one thing I don't know if you mentioned too is like it's beautifully produced. I love the entire sound on this album with all the instruments and the way that the whole production quality. I think it's like the best, like maybe the best produced like Priest album, like after my favorite like niche period when they weren't that big in the 70s. I love it, so this album's awesome. It's fun. This album has like, those dark elements that like you had mentioned, but like it does have this like one thing that didn't get mentioned is that it does have Wild Nights, Hot and Crazy Days and Locked In. The music on the album, if you take the lyrics out, it has a dichotomy that it's like it's a summer album. Like I play this album in the summer to get me pumped up. It's very much like them saying, we can do what Motley Crue do. We can do it even better because we're Judas Priest. Like, and it's one of my favorite, like top two, top three easily of like the hair metal albums of that time. The only competition I think is like Ultimate Sin. I'm a huge Ultimate Sin like fanboy. Um, so I love this album, man. This album's awesome.
There you go. Well, haters are going to hate, and feel free to put shade on us, but I don't care. It is what it is, and these are our opinions. And just remember, folks, it's just an opinion. Nobody's going to,
Yep.
Life goes on. So, David, as usual, salam.
I got you.
Thank you. Look, folks, please tell us what you think of this album. Favorite songs, least favorite songs, where it sits in the Judas Priest discography. We love reading your comments. But one thing's for sure, me and David will be racking our brains to pull apart another album, and controversial or not, very soon on Rock Daydream Nation. All the best, take care, and cheers.
God bless.